Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope this video finds you well wherever you are in the world. And if you don't mind, I'd very much like to continue with a discussion of the recent releases of the Criterion collection for this year, 2020. This time, I would like to focus on the release for which the Criterion collection bestowed spy number 1020. This is from the filmmaker John M. Stahl from 1945. The name of the film is Leave Her to Heaven. This is the film from 1945, directed by John M. Stahl and starring Cornel Wilde and Vincent Price. And of course, at the center of it all is the great and most memorable Gene Tierney in this truly unforgettable performance of this character, who is, in many respects of the term, larger than life. This is the film that is centering on her, and it centers on her even when she's not on screen. People still are occupied by who she is and what she represents. And for those who have seen the film, I think you know what I'm trying to allude to. But in any event, my friends, this is the film Leave Her to Heaven, the John M. Stahl work. It is a film that has rich colors and uses texture to display or to evoke a kind of landscape of nature and a sort of idyllic countryside or country life, which is forming the backdrop of one component of this film, namely a sort of charged melodrama that is focusing in on romantic relationships and the blossoming of love, and also jealousies and other relationships, both family and romantic, and how these play out over time. So this is a film that is one part that kind of melodrama. But for those of you who know the film, it is much more than a melodrama. It is a film that also operates in the realm of what might be related to or akin to, say, a film noir film, complete with its own extremely unforgettable femme fatale role. And if I could go further, this film also feels like a suspense thriller that has, again, at its heart, the memorable performance of Gene Tierney. And it operates almost to the extent that it feels some parts suspense thriller, other parts almost like a psychological horror film. So this film has many hats that it wears as the viewer is watching the film and experiencing the film. And it also plays with time and space. It goes from the present to the past, and it also deals with things like courtroom drama. It also deals with things like romantic drama. There are some elements that might be close to romantic comedy in certain aspects. It is also a family drama, and it is also a very suspenseful work. So there are so many things going on here, which makes this film such a fascinating example of 1940s Hollywood. And as I say, at the center is a really charged, chilling performance by Gene Tierney, who is adorning the cover here. A really beautiful cover, and just one of the most iconic scenes in the film. And she gives a performance that relies in part on her look and her demeanor, which is very, very beautiful. And at the same time, there is a reliance on the outward in order to either connect with or otherwise hide or conceal the inside of the particular person. And so that dichotomy, that give and take between the outside and inside, is one aspect, one primary aspect that makes her character, Ellen, the main character in the film, really an almost mesmerizing subject in terms of the proceedings of this film. This is just a powerhouse of a performance by Gene Tierney, and it goes in many directions, some of which are almost unexpected. And so there are many things at work in this film, Leave Her to Heaven. So this is the Criterion Collection release. Once again, this is spine number 1020. And we should mention that this is, here's the front and here is the back. So it has a kind of red motif. And this is what is described as being a new 2K digital restoration. So it is a restoration of a film that relies heavily on the use of color and the color palette. And so anyone who is very knowledgeable of this film, you will of course be paying attention to how the colors are portrayed and how they register when you see them on the screen through this presentation from Criterion. And as far as the supplements are concerned, that is one area that I think is quite interesting and is worth mentioning. Besides the 2K digital restoration of the film, the only other features of this are the trailer and also a new Criterion-produced interview with the wonderful and highly knowledgeable film scholar Imogen Sarah Smith. I should point out, however, that there are no other special features here. There is, for example, no commentary track. There is no, for example, little supplement about movie tone news or anything like that. There is no option to hear the isolated score, for example. So this is unlike, say, the release of this film that was made by Twilight Time. So for anyone who has the earlier limited edition, now out of print, release by Twilight Time of this film, Leave Her to Heaven, you'll know that that version had, for instance, the audio commentary track with Richard Schickel and Daryl Hickman, and also it had the isolated score option, and also it had the trailer, and it also had the movie tone news supplement, and so you had a presentation that, arguably speaking, could be said to include a little bit more than what is found, at least as described on the back of the Criterion box here, on the back of the tin, as it were. And so on the one hand, one might be tempted to think that, yes, maybe that Twilight Time release is the one to keep, and perhaps this one does not have anything that is new. But however, I should mention the interview that I referred to earlier, which is the new Criterion-produced interview with Imogen Sarah Smith. It is about 26 or 27 minutes, so it's fairly long, relatively speaking, compared to other, say, interviews given by film scholars for other Criterion releases. So it's a good length, and Imogen Sarah Smith is incredibly knowledgeable about the works of John M. Stahl. So this is very helpful to provide a little bit of background into the thematic concerns, shall we say, of Stahl's earlier works building up to this film, Leave Her to Heaven. So she already lays the groundwork, I think, very effectively from the get-go. She also makes some very needed comparisons and connections with, for instance, the works of Douglas Sirk. So as some of you may know, there are some cinematic connections to be had between John M. Stahl and Douglas Sirk. And those connections are very important, especially when we lead into a discussion of this film, Leave Her to Heaven, and how this is a one-part charged melodrama. And so this is something that all this discussion of John M. Stahl is actually very, very important as a setup and setting up the foundations for the rest of the discussion by Imogen Sarah Smith, which is about the film itself. I should mention one other thing, that Imogen Sarah Smith makes a really fascinating comparison between the works of John M. Stahl and his thematic concerns during his career in the 1930s, for example, on the one hand. And she makes a very interesting connection with the cinema of Mikio Naruse, the Japanese filmmaker, on the other hand. And I find that comparison to be quite apt and very well described by Imogen Sarah Smith. And then through this, she gets into a discussion of the film itself with very keen and precise specificity, and also a real knowledgeable and a very sharp eye. Her sense of observation is superb, and she gives so much information, and it is presented so well. And I'm a great fan of her work, Imogen Sarah Smith's work. And so to have her speak about this film in a very easy to follow manner, but still also filled with so much information, is incredibly helpful. So she also, for instance, talks about Jean Tierney and the certain subtleties and nuances of her performance that make her performance really stand out. She also talks about certain aspects of the film's content and some of the more so-called shocking elements of the film, and some of the more, shall we say, famous or really, really iconic moments of the film. And so she points out certain details with respect to that. She also talks about the use of color, the color palette of this film. And she talks not just in terms of the richness and the lushness of what is being presented on screen, both in interior shots, but also in external location shots and the vistas of nature that are on display. But Imogen Sarah Smith speaks not only of this kind of use of color, which is of course very evident, but she also speaks of it in terms of a kind of purposeful application of color to scenes and settings that in one way or another, and she specifies in the interview, in one way or another help to highlight or augment certain characteristics of a persona that is on screen at the time. And so these connections and these observations that Imogen Sarah Smith make during this interview, I think, are incredibly helpful, and they provide key guidance to a further and deeper appreciation of this work. And so I think that this interview, a one-on-one with Imogen Sarah Smith, is quite key and quite essential in terms of this release. Now, I can also say that it would have been really nice. It would have been really nice if Criterion were able to have an audio commentary track as well. That would have been really nice. So, for instance, if Criterion were able to get the rights, for instance, to that earlier track that was used for the Twilight Time release, for instance, then I think that would have been really helpful. Or, as an alternative, it would have been really interesting to have, say, Imogen Sarah Smith provide a feature-length commentary track in addition to the great interview that she gives. So I think that would have been really nice to have. But as it happens, we have here the film released by Criterion Collection with the the 27-minute interview with Imogen Sarah Smith and the trailer. But I should say that the interview itself is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. High caliber stuff, as always. But at the same time, my friends, just please keep in mind that if you are looking for more, then you're going to have to try to find it on your own. There are a lot of clues and a lot of foundations and a lot of help and assistance that watching the interview provides, as well as reading the essay does. And so this is not leaving you completely out in the wilderness, so to speak. There are places to go, and the essay and the interview really help one along the way. But again, it would have been nice to have maybe another supplement here, or maybe another, maybe a commentary track or something to give us maybe another aspect of this particular film. It would have been really interesting. But with what we have now, I should be very clear that what we have now, the quality of that interview is amazing, absolutely amazing. And let me just round out the discussion with the essay, which is by Megan Abbott. So it's in this insert, which is a fold-out type. So on one side we have stills and information about the cast and crew, and also information about the production credits for this particular release. And then on the back we have the essay itself. And I think the essay is very, very helpful. And Megan Abbott focuses in, I think quite rightly, on Jean Tierney herself, the look, the manner of her performance, and how that is so integral to her character, Ellen, and how characters around her perceive her. And it proceeds into a discussion of the function of the character and the activities and the acts of the character as she progresses through the narrative. And so it goes into quite specific detail as to the plot elements and some spoilers of the film itself. So I think it goes without saying, of course, that if one hasn't seen this film yet, watch the film first, and then you can read the essay, and then you can watch the Imogen Sarah Smith interview. But it is a great essay, and it's certainly well worth reading. And it's another example of a great Criterion essay, which we have come to expect from Criterion, of course. But at the end of the day, we have to consider what this could have been with some more stuff. And again, on the one hand, it might seem like it might leave people maybe wanting a little bit more on the one hand. On the other hand, I must emphasize again that that interview with Imogen Sarah Smith is excellent. It is absolutely excellent. And so if you are looking for a really high caliber, high quality, densely packed with information, scholarly interview that is also very easy to understand, then that this particular supplement combined with this film itself is certainly worth considering. If you have the Twilight Time Blu-ray already, the limited edition, I don't know if it's worth it to try to get this as well. It may be if you are wanting to be completionist about it. So, which might be very interesting. But again, it's up to you. And then for those who missed out on the Twilight Time limited edition release, it is out of print, and I think it's actually quite expensive now. So it certainly, and if you want to get this film, I think this is a great opportunity to make a purchase and to get your hands on this release. And so it is something that I think one needs to consider depending on one's own circumstances, but if you are finding yourself in that class of circumstances where you don't have the film currently on Blu-ray but are looking to get it together with a really scholarly, well put together interview, then this is a release that I think is certainly worth considering from Criterion. This is the Criterion Collection's release of the film Leave Her to Heaven. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and until we meet again, Please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you once again for your time, and cheers.